Hi, my name is Danny Brown. I'm the CEO of Myriad Real Estate Group, and today we're going to talk about what you do if you have inherited a property through the passing of a loved one, and if you should consider selling it or turning it into an investment property. So there's several things that you can consider, or several things you should consider when put into this position. Should you sell it, or should you turn it into a possible investment property, and what are the ramifications of both? If you're thinking of turning it into an investment property, there's a lot to consider first. First thing to consider is the tax implications. So when you inherit the property through a trust or through probate, you're typically not going to be on the hook for any capital gains taxes. Now, of course, talk to your CPA. Every state's going to be a little bit different, and financial situations are going to be different as well. But you won't be on the hook for capital gains taxes if you decide to sell it. Now, if you turn it into a rental property, any increase in value from the day of your loved one's passing to the day you eventually decide to sell it, you will now be on the hook for potential capital gains taxes. Now, there's other things you can do around that through 1031 exchanges and whatnot, but I won't get into that in this video. Just know that any increase in value from the day your loved one passes to the day you eventually do sell that property, you will have to pay capital gains taxes on that profit. Other things to consider with the home is just being a landlord in general. I feel that most people aren't really prepared for the responsibilities of being a landlord. It is anything but passive income, so you really need to consider hiring a property manager, especially if you don't live in the state. Having a high quality property manager is crucial. They're going to be your eyes and ears on the ground. They're going to do, the tenant search, the background checks, the credit checks, property checks for you. All of that costs money. That's something that you have to factor in if you're planning on turning that into an investment property. When you have a property, just like when you own your own property, at some point in time, you're going to need a new roof. You're going to need a new air conditioner. If you have tenants living in the home, they tend to live in the home harder than you would because they don't own it. So when they vacate, you're looking at new flooring, possible painting, cleaning, and all of that stuff could cost you more than the security deposit that you collect from the tenant. I have several clients currently that turn properties into rentals and immediately regret it upon the people moving out because the security deposit they got, which is limited in Arizona by the Landlord-Tenant Act, was not enough to cover the damages that they did upon leaving. Now, of course, you could take them to court, but how easy and non-time consuming is that, right? So most attorneys will tell you it's not worth your time, just get it fixed, chalk it up to a loss and move on. So the cost of maintenance is a huge one. The other thing to consider is also liability. So when I'm working with investment clients, I tell them to never buy an investment property that has a pool. You don't get a much higher of a return on it, and you only increase your liability and also the cost of maintenance because now you have a pool to maintain. You're not going to allow the tenant to maintain it. You need to hire the pool guy. You need to pay the pool guy to come and maintain and service that swimming pool. The liability part of it is you own the home. So you need to make sure that all the child barrier regulations are being met, and even if somebody still drowns, odds are you're getting sued. So you need to make sure that you have extra insurance now to protect yourself in the event of a lawsuit. So having a swimming pool at that property, in my opinion, makes it a horrible investment property because the risk outweighs any sort of reward. Another consideration is it in a homeowners association? If those tenants violate the rules of the HOA, you as the homeowner are the one that are getting fined for it because it's associated to the property, not the tenants. Owning investment properties can be a very great way to grow your wealth. And you always got to start with one, but you got to have more than one. You would never take your entire retirement and invest it in just crypto or just Facebook or just Google or just U.S. treasuries, right? You're going to diversify it and have a well-diversified portfolio. Rentals are the same thing. You don't want to own just one, because at some point in time, like I mentioned, you're going to have large expenses associated with that property due to maintenance. You're also going to have vacancy, where it's not easy to find tenants. Like now, it's pretty hard to find tenants and they're not paying that much. You're having to give a lot to tenants in order to attract them into your property. So there's going to be times at which that property does not cash flow. And so the idea is, if you have multiple properties, when that one isn't cash flowing, hopefully the others are, that offset that one, right? So the cost of an air conditioner can run you something like 10 to 15 grand. How long is that 10 to 15 grand investment going to kill the cash flow on that property before that air conditioner is paid off and you're back to break even? So these are all things that you should consider if you're planning on turning that inherited property into an investment. Like I said, you've got to start with one, but if you're building a well-diversified portfolio, definitely plan on trying to own more than one. So it sounds like, as a realtor, I'm trying to talk you out of turning this into an investment property and have me list the home for you instead. That's the farthest from the truth. I just want you to be well prepared, and I would have this conversation with any new investor planning on buying investment properties just in general. So on the buy side, if I'm helping an investor, I have these same conversations so that they are well prepared for what it's going to take to be a landlord. The last thing I want is for that person to call me a year later and be like, that was awful, I hated it, now I want to sell it. And odds are they can't, because they're upside down, right? Because they've only had that property for maybe a year. So I just want you to be educated and well informed to what you're potentially getting into if you're thinking of turning that inherited property into an investment home. If you have any questions on what to do with the property that you've inherited or are going to inherit, definitely leave them in the comments below. And I cannot express enough that if you own a property currently and it's not in a trust, to go do that. It is your responsibility as an adult to do that, and it should be buy a house, the next thing you do, meet with an estate attorney and put it in a trust. Like, those are the things in sequential order. So if you have a property, get it in a trust. I cannot express that enough. If you have questions on that, again, leave them in the comments. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.